Earlier this month, I joined the annual GMTK Game Jam, and I made a game about farming, but to find out why, we need to go back all the way to the beginning. The Game Jam started at 11 a.m. my time, and I wasn't busy at the time, so it was no problem for me to grab a whiteboard and wait for the theme to be revealed so I could start writing down as many ideas as I could. And I thought I would have tons of them, but then this happened.
And this year's theme is just one word: loop.
So a bit of a problem. My brain stopped working. After tons of thinking, I was somehow able to think of 3 ideas. A game where the player is always moving and you can flip loops to make the player switch the direction when they hit it, a platformer where you throw a rope around little circles to get to the goal, and a game about trying to harvest as many flowers as possible in 30 seconds. But the flowers keep looping their growing animation. I started by trying the first idea. Making the player was pretty simple, and all I had to do was just constantly make its X position increase a little. And then I had to make the portal so I would switch your direction. This was pretty simple because all I actually had to do was make it so if you press the right or left arrow key, it will change the direction of all the portals. And then if the player sensed a collision with one of them, they would go in the direction the loop was facing. It was soon obvious to me that this wasn't the best idea I had thought of. And I also for some reason didn't try the platformer idea, even though that one could have definitely performed better. And I honestly wish that I made that one instead because I actually didn't really like working on this one because it was all code and stuff. But anyways, I decided to go with the flower idea, and it was pretty easy to just make it so you could place a Godot icon on a grid. I don't know if you know this, but the Godot icon is maybe just a little bit not a flower. So I went on to make some flower art and some growing animations, and also some soil to replace the random blue squares, which are also kinda not soil. After setting this up in game, it looked pretty cool. But the flowers would just keep growing and you could not harvest them at all, which was the entire goal of the game. So I coded up a simple system which basically just works the opposite of placing them down. Basically it checks to see if you click the grid space when it's done growing. And if you do, it adds 1 to the flower counter. I also briefly made a countdown that would stop the level after it reaches 0. But after that we had to talk about level design, which is my favorite thing about game development, and soon you're going to see why I wish I made a platformer. In this game, the only way I could get the flower placement to work is to manually write in every soil position, which sucked. And the actual only level design that I got to do was the cliff for each level. The platformer definitely would have been way more fun to make, but that was all I got done on day 1. I started off day 2 by making the water feel more natural and move horizontally. This was pretty easy because all I had to do was make a little animation that was always playing. I also decided that I didn't just like the plain white text that appeared, so I hopped into Sprite to make a background for it, and I also changed the color of the text. And the first level was already finished. So the next thing that I had to do was make a next level button. You know that one guy who took 1.5 hours just to make a next level button on his jam game? Ha, couldn't be me. So after an hour and a half, I got the next level button working, and then started work on the next 2 levels. They were pretty simple, but I didn't really like that the third one was just even bigger than the last two. So I decided to introduce a new mechanic. These are scissors. They're a pair of sentient scissors that will go in an S pattern and cut down flowers no matter if they're fully grown or not. I made them by creating an animated sprite and writing a similar script to the flower placement. It just doesn't need player input and does the opposite, which means deleting the flowers instead of placing them. This was definitely a less productive day, but to finish it off, I accidentally made a level that was impossible to get any flowers from. But anyways, that's all I got done on day 2, and now I'm going to bed. Today, I decided that the game was way too brown, and that there was a very easy way to fix this. All I had to do was go back 700 years and yoink the color gray from old TV shows and then put it into Sprite to change the cliff color from brown to gray. In my opinion, this made the game look much better, but that only took, I don't know, like 30 minutes. But now for my favorite but also least favorite part. What I mean by this is that I get to design the levels, but that also meant that I had to do some more painstaking grid space designing. I ended up making around 3 to 4 levels before deciding that I need a new hazard mechanic. This is a mole. Yes, it's literally just a mole. I made this silly little guy by drawing it on Sprite, and then adding a script onto it that makes it come up on random spaces to eat the flowers. And now we can have more diverse levels that don't just get bigger and more random. I then went on to make a level label for every level. Again, this was pretty easy to make. I just had to make a simple sprite for this and then add text over it for each level number. The last thing that I wanted to do today was make a little title screen because I had finally finished all of the painstaking level design. I started by hopping into Sprite to draw the title, which turned out pretty good and I think it fits the style of the game pretty well. And then I made a control node scene to put it into. Then I copied over the background from all the levels, and aside from the start button, I felt like it was missing something. So I decided to add some animation to the title, which was originally going to exist, but it ended up being too complicated, so I just didn't keep it in the game. Since the game was basically done, I quickly learned how to export Godot games to HTML, and I definitely didn't break the entire game, so that wasn't fun, and it ended up taking 3 hours to fix, but at least I got it working. And then I uploaded it to itch.io 20 hours before the deadline. I took the next couple of days playing and rating other people's games. Some of my favorites include Caught in a Fruit Loop, a clicker game where the game fights back, Snake Eats Snake, and a game where you try to eat all the candy around the level and then loop back around to bite your own tail. And Loopconomy, a clicker game where you spin your mouse cursor around the box that you would usually be clicking. But my overall favorite game that I played during this time was called Vood Loop. It's a game about a puppet that can only move left and right, but after collecting an action, you can add it to a loop, which can then make you jump, punch, unlock a door, or dash. Somehow, my game got a total of 76 ratings, and they were all pretty positive reviews. This made me think I had a guaranteed spot in the top 100. Wait, what do you mean there isn't a top 100? Why have you done this to us? Yeah, for some reason this year there isn't an overall rating, which does mean that the top 100 doesn't exist either. But I think my game actually has a pretty high chance of getting in the top 100 in creativity, even though there are over 9,000 games that I'm competing with. So the day the ratings got out, I got onto itch.io and went a little bit crazy about my rating. Wait, how is that worse than last year? So this year, I got some scores that were technically worse than last year, but I got lucky enough to place 2,091 in artwork, which is technically better than my overall score from last year. So yeah, I'm definitely doing the jam next year, I'm getting a higher rating, and I'm going to make a platformer. Big shout out to Hughie's Game Caught in a Fruit Loop for getting into the top 100 in narrative and audio, and I will see you next time.